Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Cage Talk. Remember, every Thursday, another fighter, another story. Today, I have a gentleman who was in the UFC. He was Strikeforce lightweight champion, Strikeforce US lightweight champion. He was also in Bellator. He did World Fighting Alliance. He's done also Pride and, again, Bellator commentator as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we have no other than Josh the Punk Thomson. How you doing, buddy?
I did Dream also. Don't forget about that one.
I think I misread that one, but yeah, Dream as well. I'm sorry about that, but how you doing, man?
All right. No. I'm just giving you a hard time, dog. I know the list is long but distinguished, baby. It's a long list. It's a long list of of companies I fought for, and not just that, but I mean I've just been all around the world. Worked for a lot of I worked for one as a commentator as well. You know, I was there for a couple of years covering some of their events in all around Asia, and so. Yeah, I've been in the sport, man. Long ass time. I think. How old are you, bro? You were probably like 7, 8 years old when I was in the UFC. Not even that old.
I'm 31, so I was up there. I was in high school when I think what was it?
You're 31. I'm 43. So that you were probably like, yeah, you were in middle school.
Yeah.
You were like in 5th grade, bro, when I was in the UFC.
Hey, man, that's how crazy. That's how long you've been here, man. That's good. Some people are in the UFC for maybe 3 or 4 fights and they're out. You've been like you said, you've been in a bunch of organizations and stuff like that, which is really, really cool. And a lot of fans respect you, man. And you also do commentating, which not a lot of fighters can do. There's some that are good, and then there's some that then actually can pull it off. And I think you're one of them. So good job, man.
Yeah, I think what it is when it comes to the commentating gigs or anything to do outside of the sport itself, fighters have to learn not to talk about themselves. You know, in the podcast realm, I can do it. I can talk about myself because I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
But when it comes to actually being a broadcaster, being a commentator for any organization, doesn't matter which organization you are one for, you need to learn that you need to not talk about yourself and make it about the fighter that you're talking about. Make it about them because you're trying to build them up to be a star like you were, or you wanted to be, or whoever, you know, when you were in your career. And a lot of fighters have a hard time deciphering between making it about themselves and then pumping the guy up, the one that they're trying to promote. And they've got to learn. If they can learn to separate that, they can have success, I think, in the business.
Definitely. And also not to be a little biased. Lately, people have been complaining about, again, we won't get into it, but about being biased and stuff like that. And you can see it sometimes. I mean, again, fighters are very emotional, you know. It's so I could see where it could lead into that, where they're upset and stuff like that. But
yeah, it's not even so. Look, I think as long as there's a full disclosure, you know, there's been some issues before in the past with some fighters that are commentary, they do commentary, but then they don't tell the audience that, oh, that's my teammate, or oh, I train with him, you know, a couple days a week, but he's not from my gym. They don't give the background, and they need to. Yeah. You know, like they need to say like, oh, I know this guy, I know him really well. And like, I'm going to give an example, like this weekend, like I'm a big fan. But I mean, I was also one of the biggest reasons why Anthony Johnson was able to start his career in the UFC, you know, and he'll tell you himself, and I've had him on my podcast weighing in, and we've talked about it, and he's brought it up as well, is that like, but I'm going to tell the audience, like I'm close with him, and I want you guys all to understand, if I do come across as biased, I don't mean to. I just believe in his potential and his ability. Mm-hmm. Some of the athletes that commentate, they don't do that. And then they find out later that when people are criticizing why the commentator was so hard on that guy's side after obviously he lost, or after obviously it wasn't a great performance, but you thought he fought a great fight.
Yeah.
It's like they want to know why. They do research, and then people come out in the comment section, yeah, because he trains with him, or oh, because he used to coach him, or oh, because, you know, he knows, like, you know, he's a family friend, or they're related. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be any of those things. You know, so when it comes down to that, I think as a commentator, you have to have full disclosure. You're no different than basically like a reporter. You got to you have to tell all the backstory to it all. Otherwise, people aren't going to believe anything you say going forward. And that's one thing I've never had a hard time with. That's why people call me the Punk, is that I'm pretty upfront and pretty honest about a lot of things. I'm very direct, and this is how it is. And you guys may not just yourself or anybody, they may not like me because I'm that way, but at least you know what you're getting with me.
Yeah.
You know what
Absolutely.
I mean? Like I've got to a point in my career where there was just nothing fake about me. And this is who I am, and it is what it is. And, and this is who I'm going to be. And if it gets me somewhere, great. And if it doesn't, then at least I know who to blame. Gotcha. Instead of trying to be somebody else, be yourself. And it'll get you far. I think you'll find the right people to surround you with the goals that you have the same goals for. And so I think that's, as long as you're very upfront with people, I think they'll learn to respect you more as a commentator as well.
I think you're right. In general, I think all the stars will line up regardless. I don't think you have to put yourself out there necessarily. I think everything will fall into place. But I agree with you 100% about at least having a backstory so people know where you're coming from. So there's not like, oh, this guy's wishy-washy. No, like this guy's straightforward and shit, which makes a lot of sense. And I think it would work perfect again. But, certain things don't work out that way, and some people are not built like that or have that mindset. So unfortunately, you have to go with it, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of people need to like for commentators or reporters or media people, they need to put their own stuff aside and really focus on the person in front of them and make it all about them. It's the person that you're trying to build up or you're trying to tell a story about. And some people have a hard time doing that, and you need to put your biasness aside. And I try to do that as much as possible. And if I feel like I am leaning that way, or I think I'm going to lean that way, then you got to be very upfront with them and say, hey, I know this person. I know his tendencies. I know how good he is. I believe in his abilities because I've worked with him or I've trained with him or whatever the matter is. But being upfront is very key, I think, in this industry.
Got you, man. And again, you do like you were talking about your podcast, and we'll talk a little bit about that. How did you get that going? And again, you and Big John do a great job. And again, if no one's ever listened to it, I highly recommend it. It's again, there's a bunch of podcasts, but there's certain ones that you like to stick around just because it's so real and stuff. And like you said, you kind of tell it how it is. So it's nice to hear.
Yeah. What happens is so I had a podcast before called Sammy and the Punk. I was doing it with the local radio station host for 102.5 KDON. And great guy. His name was Sam Diggity. And we just started to realize that the show it gained a lot of traction, but it wasn't getting to that next level of growth that we wanted to. And he just recently got married. It was kind of like start a family, and it was just kind of like we started splitting ways a little bit. And I wanted to start maybe possibly doing the show, like a show kind of on my own. And I started doing it for a little bit on our own. And as I started working for Bellator, Big John and I started working together doing commentary for Bellator. And I just noticed that him and I were kind of hanging out all the time, like talking fights, talking fighters, being nerds like we are. And it really just came down to there was a lot of information that he had that I didn't know. And there was a lot of things that I talked about that kind of made him go, from a young fighter's perspective, as I like to say. John been in the game for so long, I like to give him a hard time about being old. You know what I mean? But I think if you had to compare the two opposite, you had a fighter's perspective and you had someone, like John McCarthy, who's been the longest, obviously, was the longest rep in the business, and someone who helped kind of get MMA to the forefront, as well as the rules and the guidelines and all the other things that go along with it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to that, I think it was kind of a no-brainer. Let's because there's a lot of things about being a ref the fighters don't understand and they don't get. And the casual fan also just thinks like, oh, he should have stopped the fight.
Yep.
Well, when that situation arises, which it arises almost every single fight card, you got to have a ref that's there, and who better to have there to talk about it and break it down on why it wasn't stopped at that moment, or why it was stopped too early at that moment. Definitely. You know, we look at both ways. Yeah. And, you know, like, why was the cut? Why did the doctor stop it when it only had like a cut going like this versus this way? Yep. And there's details to that. You know, there's a lot of reasons on why things happen. Mm-hmm. That fighters are not aware of, you know, and how long breaks are for when you get an eye poke versus a growing shot, or, you know, when you get joint manipulation, like all those little details that fighters don't know. you know, and then especially when the rules change now from state to state sometimes, where there's got to be 2 hands down versus just 1 hand down. Is it just the fingers? Is it the palm? You know, what's the deal with instant replay? These are all things that fighters, they just think like, oh, you can just pull up instant replay. Well, it's not. Instant replay is not valid in all states.
Yeah.
So there's things that like a lot of fighters just don't know.
Or
and
even
so
fans,
I think it's,
even fans as well.
Oh, fans for sure don't know.
Out. They freak out.
Yeah, exactly. And so we bring that element to it. I think between John and I give you the fighter's perspective on things, and John gives you his perspective on things. You know, and so it works really well. But what I think separates our show from all the other shows, right, is that we talk about MMA. We don't talk about just the UFC, and we don't talk about just Bellator, and we don't talk about just any of the other organizations. We talk about MMA in as a sport.
Yeah.
So we cover the best we can. You know, when we can watch one championships, we cover that as well. We cover PFL, we cover Bellator, you know, and we cover the UFC. And so when we're having this conversation about the sport, people are like, oh, this, you know, like, where's the timestamps for the UFC? Why don't you guys start watching watching the whole show and getting to know, because there's hundreds of fighters that are not in the UFC that are just barn burners of fighters.
I agree.
You know, I mean, like, I could sit here all day and tell you just how great. I mean, like, let me just give you an example. Anthony Pettis could have signed and re-signed with the UFC and stayed there, you know, but he signed with Clay. He signed with PFL and went there, and Clay Collard beat him. Don't get me wrong, it was a great fight. Yeah. But Clay Collard is a tough son of a gun, and he's somebody that put on a great performance. I've been saying it forever when I worked with One. The guys over in One are just nasty. They are really good, especially on the feet. And Eddie Alvarez is having a tough time over there. You know what I mean? So you have that. And then Demetrius Johnson, he's having a tough time over there, who everyone thought was, who I even, for myself as well,
the greatest,
would consider to be the greatest of all time in that weight class at 125. Well, he's struggling right now because it's a different, I think a little bit of a rule set, like we saw in the last fight. Yeah. But you have someone who was just so dominant in that division for so many years, and go over there and he's walked out of there with more damage in just like 2 or 3 fights than he did his whole damn career over in the UFC. So don't tell me that these guys are not good in other organizations, you know? And I mean, like, if you look at it too, Vincent Henderson had a lot of miles still left on him. Yeah. And he came over, and for the first couple fights, he couldn't buy a win. You know, and the same thing goes with what's his name, Jose Perez, who's fighting on Friday night. He's 0-2 in Bellator. He came over 7-2 in the UFC. He's 0-2 in Bellator. So when we have these conversations, you know, about fighters that are good in all organizations, they're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. I mean, I look at Lance Palmer. Lance Palmer's a stud, man, just an absolute stud. And Bubba Jenkins just beat him. And Bubba Jenkins came from Bellator. He went to the PFL, you know, and he beat him. And I'm a big fan of both guys. They're both very talented and so fun to watch, you know. But there's plenty of talent outside. So when we do our show, we talk about MMA, you know. And if you don't want to hear about MMA, that's cool. We talk a little bit. I should say we talk shit about Triller, and you know, and all the cluster that's going on over there. But you know, we also talked about the Roy Jones and the Mike Tyson stuff. We talk a little bit about, like, say, Canelo and, you know, his fights coming up. We talk boxing as well. But it really just comes down to, you know, for big-name boxing, we'll cover it. But, you know, we do the best we can. But we cover the sport of MMA. We don't just cover one organization.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I think the UFC and young people the fans who watch and stuff, are kind of like not unorganized, uneducated on fighters and stuff like that. They all automatically assume that the UFC, which, don't get me wrong, they have good fighters, but again, like you said, they're almost like hidden gems everywhere throughout all the organizations. I mean, you can't say, you know, everyone says, like, you know, Bellator, they don't have that many good fighters, and it's like the smaller, like, that's not true. I mean, I've talked to so many Bellator fighters and stuff that are just complete animals and stuff like that. And again, I think it was the LFA. Is that,
yes, LFA.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you get fighters like that are like these small organizations, but they're just so hungry and stuff. And again, when someone's in a fight I mean, it's 50-50 chance on who can win. And understand that. That's one thing that a lot of people are just, again, stuck on the UFC. Again.
Yeah, that's the thing. So let me just tell you, obviously I was teammates with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he's phenomenal. 29-0, dominant career, really great guy, great person, all these other things, right? But you also got, now that he's retired, he had the best record in all of MMA at 29-0. We've got Yaroslav Amosov. You still hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. You're kind of frozen, and you kind of have like a. There you go.
Yeah, I got you.
There you go. You're better.
You got me?
Yeah, that's good, man. Go ahead.
Let me see. You're frozen. Your face is frozen.
Oh, my face is frozen now. Hold on. Now your face is frozen. Hold on. It might be my internet. Let me take off my Wi-Fi real quick. You good now? Let's see.
No, you're still frozen.
I hear you. I hear you. But
if I gotta move my laptop. Well, you gotta move my laptop around.
Yeah, let me try to get the Wi-Fi. Give me a second.
Nope, there you are.
There we go. All right, there we go. Perfect. All right. So
yeah, I feel like, okay, so like to carry on, we had some technical issues there. But no, to carry on, it like with Khabib, 29-0, phenomenal fighter, great person, just absolute stud when it comes to, being in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
But the best record in MMA now belongs to a Bellator fighter. That may end, when he fights Douglas Lima. But he's 25-0, Yaroslav Amosov, and he's beaten a lot of top guys. He's beaten a lot of tough guys. He just beat Logan Storley, who was also undefeated at 11-0. Now he's 11-1. But Logan Storley, I want to say, was like a 7-time state champ for South Dakota or North. Yeah, I think it was South Dakota in wrestling. Mm-hmm. Just an absolute stud. You know what I mean? And Yaroslav Amosov had never wrestled before. He out-wrestled him in different positions. Not all the time, but throughout the night. He had a couple good positions. He was able to stuff takedowns. A lot of people are not able to do that to Logan Storley. Mm-hmm. He did a lot of good work. It was a great fight. They both got exhausted. It was an absolute stud of a fight between the two. But those are two young and up-and-coming guys that the sky is the limit for them. And Yaroslav Amosov is a guy who's undefeated. He's got the best record in all of MMA, and he's in Bellator. He's fighting Douglas Lima, who's considered to be one of the top two, if not the number one guy in the world at that weight class.
Definitely.
And so when I think about the guys that we have on our roster that are young and up and coming, guys like Patchy Mix, I know he just lost to Juan Archuleta, but he's a young and up and coming stud. I know a lot of people think James Gallagher. I like him a lot. I think he's so young. That's the thing. I think he's only 22, 23 years old. He's a baby still.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you've got a lot of these guys that are young, that are just coming up, and that's kind of how you start a promotion. You start building your younger talent, to be stars. And that's kind of where we're at right now, with the Bellator organization. I know there's a lot of people that I could also mention. There's more of them, but off the top of my head, I'm just thinking like those are the top ones. Those are the top ones. Rafion Stotts, who's fighting against Josh Hill coming up. That's the main event of the prelims on Saturday night. So you can watch that, I think, on the Bellator YouTube channel. But that's going to be a barn burner of a fight and a chess match of a fight. Should be a really good fight. So, there's just a ton of fights. Austin Vanderford's fighting Fabian Edwards, Leon Edwards' brother, on May 21st, on the Chris Cyborg card. So that's going to be a phenomenal fight. Fabian's a lot bigger than Austin. Austin's got the better wrestling, and so it should be a great fight there too. And Austin being undefeated, I think he's 11 or 12-0 or something like that. He's got, so he's phenomenal. Fabian's got one loss. We lost to Costello Van Steenis, who's a stud also. That's Gegard Mousasi's number one training partners, looking to take over the 185-pound division once Gegard starts to make his way out of there. So there's guys that I could sit here and list to you all day, and we've got a couple young, talented females as well. You got Janae Harding, Leah McCourt, you know, just young, talented fighter. I love Alejandra Lara. She's a phenomenal fighter. I know she's coming off of a loss. She just lost to Watanabe, but a very close fight. And Watanabe was considered to be one of the best Japanese fighters right now in the world, if not one of the best female fighters in the world at that weight class. And so to watch that fight happen, it was a great fight as well. So there's a lot of tough talent. And I can't forget, obviously, about Alimale McFarland. You've got Liz Carmouche. You've got Alimale McFarland, to me, is probably one of the nastiest grapplers in the game right now. Yeah. So I think there's plenty of talent that is in other organizations. The one knock that we just don't have, and I can agree with on people when they talk about Bellator or just any other organizations, is that UFC has 600-something fighters under their roster. We can only have about 300, you know, because we don't do 60 shows a year like they do. So we need to make sure that we are making sure we're not wasting fighters' times by sitting on the bench for a long duration of time.
Absolutely.
We've got to keep them active so they can make money. So when that being said, we can only sign about, 300 fighters, versus the 600 or 650 or 700 that the UFC has. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that we have, a lot of females that we have that are up and coming, that are just really good, that I'm excited for people to start finding out about. And that's why when we do our Weighing In podcast, what we do is we make sure that we talk about all the young and up and coming fighters that you should keep an eye out for. Big John had talked a lot about Clay Collard potentially beating Anthony Pettis. And I was like, do you really think he's so straight up and down? He's going to come forward. He's like, he's just got that tenacity. He can take shots and he can come forward and he knows how to wrestle. He knows how to just make it a dirty, grimy fight. That's exactly how he beat Anthony Pettis.
And he took a head kick. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great fight. It was a great fight.
That's awesome, man. And again, just you talking about it. And that's one thing I still, you can tell you still had the passion for and stuff, for the sport and stuff. Did you ever think about ever coming back? Does that give you that itch?
No, absolutely not.
Okay, that's good.
No.
That's good.
Absolutely not. I'm not. It's not even in the. No, it's like not even in the back of my mind. Like people say, that's it's good. Sometimes in the back of my mind. No, it's not even there. I kicked that shit out my ear. It's gone, bro. It's gone. Good. I kicked it out of my ear. I'm fucking. There's no way I'm coming back. I'm 43 years old, man. I have no desire to even step foot into a gym to work out hard. Okay.
All right. I respect that. That's
no.
Good.
It really just comes down to I don't want to take any more shots to the head. Okay. And it's not that I'm feeling. It's not that I'm feeling any like symptoms or anything. I mean, I have all the same symptoms that most people have in terms of like forget my keys upstairs, that kind of stuff. Or like I walk into a room like, okay, what am I looking for? Like I get that, but everyone gets that. Yeah. And so as much as I want to say like, oh yeah, I got that, but I do know there's going to be some effects probably later on in my life, but right now I'm able to hold a conversation with you and I love the fact that I can do commentary because I can talk. As you can tell right now, I'm one of those guys that can just do this.
Yeah, man. That's fine.
And when it comes to the fight game, this is what I do. And so I love talking about other fighters. I love talking about their successes, and I love talking about how they could potentially be better. And I also love giving the cold hard facts about certain stuff. These are the cold, hard facts about a fighter, and hopefully they learn from it and grow from it. I'm not trying to dig on them. I'm not trying to like criticize them. It's kind of that tough love because I want all fighters to be successful. It's not going to happen, but I have the passion to let people know like, hey, I'm not going to be your yes man that you're used to having around you, telling you all the shit that blows sunshine up your ass to make you feel better. You either want to be a fighter or you don't, and these are the things and the steps that I feel like you may need to take. Or things to even maybe look at and consider with your coach. It's always easier for someone from the outside looking in and saying how they could potentially make their career better, and I've taken a ton of outside advice. When I get it from some of the other fighters, I got to tell you, one of my best friends was Trevor Prangley, who's a former UFC fighter, Bodog champion, all these other things, right? And one day, it was right before I had lost to Clay Guida. It was right after I lost to Clay Guida. And he sat me down and he goes, look, he's like, for your last 3 fights, he's like, you basically have just been out partying all the way up until the last 2 weeks of your camp. He's like, you've been out to the club on Wednesday night. You've been out to the club on Friday night. You've been out to the club on Saturday. He's like, you come in at 3 a.m. He's like, you sleep, you wake up early, you go run. He's like, sure, but you're not the same guy. I see it in the gym. I see this. You pretty much saved my career, And so it was a cold, hard fact of someone who was really close to me and just said, look, you're fucking up your life. And so you gotta sometimes from the outside looking in, take advice from people that you may not want to hear, you may not definitely probably don't like. And but you know, you gotta open up your ears and listen to those people, because they see something that you don't see, or you're just in denial about.
Yep.
And so as much as you care about people, as much as you want to say you don't care what other people think, there's certain times where you have to listen to certain people if you want to advance and get further in your career or your life.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's 100% on point, man. And again, that's always. Was there anything when you were fighting, saying someone actually mentioned maybe a possibly, like, you know, just trying to give you advice and you kind of didn't go with it, maybe a training or maybe your coach throughout your career by any chance, that you were maybe like when you were younger, when you were first coming up by any chance?
No, it wasn't that. No, I wouldn't say. I pretty much listened to a lot of advice from a lot of people, especially the ones that I trained with. No, I took a lot of their advice.
Okay.
I was a sponge. I was a gym rat. I was like a real nerd when it came to the gym. You know, I guess the only advice that I probably shined on was probably like when I first started was like from Frank Shamrock, and that just comes with years. Mm-hmm. When he would try to teach moves, I would do techniques like at a fast pace when I was drilling, and he would always yell, "Slow it down, slow it down, slow it down," and I would never listen, and I would just drill faster. You know what I mean? And now that I've owned a couple gyms and I've taught kids and I've taught adults, and I see adults and kids drilling it really fast and not really getting it the proper way, I think to myself, like, that's exactly who I was, you know? And so Frank Shamrock going, "Hey, slow down. You kind of got it, but you're missing this step and this step." And I see other people now that I'm coaching them, they're doing the same shit. And I'm like, that's who he's talking about. He's talking about me, and I'm talking to you. Like, and so, yeah, I think those are the things that I look back and go like, oh, I could have done better. I probably could have been better had I spent time slowing everything down and really trying to absorb the knowledge versus just whipping through it in repetition, just over and over and over and over again until, okay, I've got it down. Mm-hmm. You know, those are great ways to do it as well. Through memorization and repetition is wonderful, but doing it slowly and making sure everything is tight as you do it is also very important.
Gotcha. Is there any fight in particular that you kind of, you know, was your greatest memory? Maybe even if it's not a victory, maybe is it winning a title? Is it in Strikeforce? What was your, I guess, your most positive memory in fighting overall?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things. I mean, there was several things. You know, for me, there was one. The first one was I always wanted to know if I was a real fighter.
Okay.
And so when I fought Hermes Franca, I was, you know, that the winner of that was supposed to fight for the UFC title. This was back in 2003. You know, the winner of that was supposed to fight for the UFC lightweight title. Him and I had fought. I dominated the first 2 rounds. In the third round, he drops me early. He beats me up for probably about 2.5 minutes, and he gasses himself out. And I wanted to know if I was a quitter. You know, I wanted to know if I was a fighter. And so he beat me so bad. Like, I was all lumped up all over. Lips were all swollen. Nose was kind of like it wasn't broken, but it was swollen. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I was banged up pretty damn bad. And, but there was never a thought in my mind, like, roll over and quit. Like, you know, you'll see some fighters, right? They'll start taking some big shots and they'll just give their back and turtle up. And that was never really on my mind, you know? And after that fight, it was like a breakthrough for me of like, I knew exactly how tough I was. And I knew how much punishment I could really take, because I took a lot of fucking hard shots in that little exchange there. I got dropped face down, ass up. I hit the ground with my face and it woke me up, you know, and I fought to a guard position, and he put a lot of damage on me for about 2 minutes, and I was able to survive, you know, and then get through the rest of the round. I actually finished the round better than he did, because he had exhausted himself so much, that I was able to get away with it. So, it was one of those fights, man. So that fight to me was important. The other thing as well, there was you know, people talking about world titles. The world title fight was great. You know, beating Gilbert Melendez, who was, you know, obviously one of my biggest nemesis.
Yeah, I'm about to say.
And arch rivals in the sport. And we had fought 3 times, and you know, they were great fights. All 3 of them were great fights. So that was a big deal. But that's still, to me, but that wasn't number two. Like number two to me was, it goes in a row where I felt like the first with Hermes Franco was I had to know about myself.
Okay.
And then the second one was my dad had passed 10 days before I fought Dwayne Ludwig. So for the U.S. title or whatever it was that we had fought for Strikeforce, my dad had passed away 10 days before that, unexpectedly also. And so I had spent the last, 10 days, the last, 5 days up in, trying to get through all the burial services and all the other stuff. And I flew directly from there to Fresno, where we fought him in Fresno. Flew down there and went around fight week. And then, so I had all that on my mind, but then on top of that as well, I woke up the day of the fight sick, so I was rushing around trying to, take, Dayquil and nasal sprays and all the other shit that I could do to get myself to clear up, because I was spitting out black, like greenish, brownish mucus and so there was a lot on my mind that fight. And I was just thinking to myself, man, like, I'd already fought Clay Guida and I had lost. That was supposed to be for the Strikeforce world title. And then, I was making my way back and I had already beat Harris Cermento. And this was, I think, my second fight after I beat Harris. I was fighting Dwayne Ludwig to see if I was going to get my way back to the title. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of expectations for me to, get back up to fight Gilbert again, or to be able to fight Gilbert, because I think Gilbert ended up winning the championship from Clay Guida. And so there was a lot of expectations on that, but I had a lot going on in my mind. My dad had passed 10 days before. My dad and I were really, really close. And there was a lot of things, man. So there was that, and I woke up sick the day of. So for me to go out there and get the win, that let me know, like, it goes back to, and let me know that I was a real fighter. Everyone was like, oh, well, why don't you stay with your family? And I'm like, look, my dad was so proud of me in terms of the fact that I was able to turn this into a career, and make good money. And at that time, I mean, that fight right there, I mean, at the time was, to me, it was a lot of money. I think I made I want to say I made 80 grand for that fight. Damn. I mean, and that was way back when. Mm-hmm. And so that was, I think, in 2000, it was 2006, so there was a lot on me to get that deal, to do that. And I felt good. It felt good to go through that. And it felt good to be able to realize that you are a fighter, and winning the world title, that was just more like, it felt good to know that all the hard work had paid off. Yeah. Going through all the stuff that I went through from, my dad passing, and my grandmother passed also. So strange. She passed 2 weeks before my world title fight. Wow. With Gilbert Melendez. And I was very close with her as well. I didn't live with her, but I went there all the time throughout the day to eat because I had no money for food. So I was getting back up to that title shot and I had money, but I was paying a lot of money in rent to live in San Jose. Mm-hmm. So she had done a lot for me when I was coming up and fighting, because I used to go there all the time to eat, because I had no money when I was training, not really, working, but not working, enough to make money and this, to pay rent and do all the other things. So there was a lot, man. There was a lot that I lost my grandmother, right before the title fight, and a lot of good things came through it all. It's like I realized how resilient I am. So those are the things that I look through. Like I look at from a family perspective, or not a family, but like a life appreciation perspective on all the things that I missed out on to become successful in what I love doing.
Gotcha. That's pretty intense and stuff. And through your accomplishments, I've been told that almost the same thing almost goes with also defeats. You have defeats and stuff like that, but they open up questions, they answer questions. Now, was there any fight that kind of changed you as for a defeat? Like there's sometimes where, some fighters are just never the same after a loss and stuff. Was there any of that in your career or anything like that?
No, I mean, yes and no. Yes, there was, yes and no. So the Clay Guida fight, like I mentioned, my buddy Trevor Prangley had pulled me aside and said, hey, you need to change your life. Like you're still going out, you're still partying, you're drinking till 3 a.m. And he was staying with me, living with me at the time. Even though he didn't live in California, he was living in Idaho at the time. He'd come down for camps and train at AKA, but he would live with me. And during those times, he was training for a camp, but I'd come, strolling in at 3 a.m., and he would get up the next day, we'd go run. we'd go work out the next day, and he just noticed that I wasn't the same type of fighter in the gym as well, because I was out all night. Some nights on Thursday night I'd go party and then go spar Friday, at noon.
Probably
and he was just like, yeah, right, smelling like alcohol. I mean, there was times where fighters were like, man, you smell like alcohol. I'm like, oh yeah, whatever. Yeah, so it just there's that was life changing to me. I feel like he kind of helped save my career. He helped put me in the right direction. I was living that life like it was gonna last forever, and it doesn't. Outside of that, I mean, I would also go on, I would say, like the Tony Ferguson fight. I was 37, I think, when I fought him. 37. Yeah, I was 37 when I fought him. And it was eye-opening to me, because I could see everything he was going to do. I just couldn't stop it. I didn't have the same strength. I used to look at myself in the mirror a lot, like, coming up, and I was always like really lean, kind of muscular, but lean and ripped, like that kind of thing. I felt physically strong. But coming into that, like almost like kind of in the Bobby Green camp, as well as the Tony Ferguson camp, I started noticing a change in my body. It just wasn't the same. I was starting to get a little bit of that older man body kind of look. And I think when that happens, you have to start looking at yourself and going, okay, look, you're not built the same way. You can't take the same damage. Your muscles aren't, your body's not building muscle like it used to. And so I just noticed that there was changes. I was seeing the punches coming, but I couldn't move out of them as fast, out of the way of them. Your
reaction time was a lot slower.
Yeah, the reaction time. There was times where I see myself throwing the combination and then waiting, instead of throwing and then getting out, but throwing and then like a hesitation and a wait, like as if I was waiting to be hit. And so it kind of put like a little bit of anxiety on me. In some of my fights after that, I just realized that I didn't enjoy it as much, realizing that you're going to get, I never really got hit a whole lot as when I was coming up. I mean, sure, I had lost to Yves Edward by a knockout, but the rest of my fights, I got dropped against Hermes Franca, but I had never really taken a whole lot of damage. I mean, there were some fights that I had some damage and some fights I didn't, but the Tony Ferguson fight, I took a lot of damage in, and that was kind of eye-opening for me to realize that, like, okay, you're getting older, and you see things. And not to mention, I was training with guys like Khabib and Islam Makhachev, Adam Piccolotti, like younger guys.
Yeah.
When you're training with the younger guys, you start seeing it. You start feeling it in the gym as well. It's not just in the fight. You start realizing you start realizing the things you used to be able to do to them, or you be able to get away with, certain stuff that they were seeing now because it was taking it so long for you to develop it.
Yeah.
I was to throw the three punch combination. They were missing all three punches because they could see it coming. And I was always kind of I lived a little bit off my speed and my aggressiveness and my, and that type of stuff. And as that starts to go, and I've said this for years, as you get older, speed kills. And for the lighter weight guys, 155, I'd say even sometimes at 170 and below, once your speed goes, those young guys, those young lions, they're gonna fucking chew you up. And then that started happening, man. That started happening to me, and it was a shit show to be. It's shitty to film, but the reality is I don't want to hang around, man. I'm one of those guys that if I wasn't working my way towards the title, then it's time to move on.
It's time to move on.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I look back at like some of the, no matter how great Muhammad Ali was, you just don't want to be. And I know there's a lot of things that go along with like how it all ended for him. But I look at other guys too, like my buddy Chuck. I'm good friends with Chuck Liddell. But like, it was too long. There was like one or two. After the one or two, it should have just been, okay, look, I've done everything. I'm the former champion. He was probably one of the most celebrated champions because he was such a great guy, such a nice guy, so fun to be around. But it just carried on, just kept fighting, and just shouldn't have been,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things. I got a lot of love for.
There was a couple of fighters exactly like that just, again, they were great champions, but to see them kind of like Randy Couture was another one that was really hard to watch. Just like Randy.
Yeah, but the thing with Randy though, Randy was still winning. That's the problem. Like Randy was still winning. You know, like that's the thing. Like he still found ways to win. That's why he fought so long.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Dan Henderson too. Like Dan, like he was still winning. Like remember, he lost to Bisping, but he could have potentially said he won that fight.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like he was still very competitive, but I think his body just started breaking down a little bit. I mean, he had a bunch of rough goes. You know, I mean, Anderson Silva fought too long. I mean, his chin was just gone. You know, like after the Weidman fight, it was kind of never the same. And you saw it in the Uriah Hall fight. Every time Uriah touched him, it kind of wobbled him.
I was
all Uriah had to do was throw more. And so all Uriah had to do was throw more. He just didn't have the confidence because he thought Anderson was like being tricky.
Yep.
And it wasn't. It was just that Anderson's getting older and just didn't have the output and just didn't have the reaction time. And those are the things. I didn't want to be that. That's kind of where I was at. I didn't want to be that. And so it was time for me to move on, man.
Oh, I mean, again, you had an excellent career, and you had, again, you were in other organizations as well. Do you have a favorite organization that you worked with, or kind of they're all almost similar? Some fighters, yes, some fighters, no.
Well, I mean, like, look, for me, my favorite organization will probably always be Strikeforce. It was just that era of like everything was the sport itself was like doing this. You know, I mean, it was just
times.
Yeah, it was just climbing. I think the hype around the sport itself was just huge, just absolutely huge. I mean, but you know, I loved being in Pride. I thought Pride was amazing. But then when I fought in Dream, it was pretty much the same company. It was like a lot of the same employees. So when I went there, it was handled very similar. It was good. Like I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that type of fun. Like it depends, man. Like I enjoyed everywhere I went. I loved working for One Championship, doing commentary there. They kind of gave me the experience, you know, a little bit beforehand. Okay. You know, before anybody else did, for me to start doing it here in Bellator. And so people that worked there, I got along really well with Rich Franklin. Loved working side by side with him. He's a great guy. Matt Hume is the CEO of that company, and I got along great with him. We taught a couple seminars together, the three of us. It was just fun. It was fun, like traveling. And you got to remember, not a lot of people travel. A lot of people travel like to Europe. A lot of people travel to, you know, to South America, Mexico, Florida, Cabo, Bahamas, all those things. You know. No one really goes to China. No one really goes to like people don't. A lot of people don't, unless you're from China, they don't go visit there a whole lot, you know.
No.
And so I mean, not in the numbers that they go to like Europe and other places. And so for me to be able to work in Beijing, Shanghai, and other areas, you know, in Singapore, Manila, I was in the Philippines, Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, like we did shows there, and to be able to do shows there in all those areas, I thought it was great. It opened my eyes a lot to other people's cultures, and it was just great experiences. So, you know, good stuff. I was very blessed, you know, throughout my career to always have a door open right when another door was about to shut. And I was very grateful for all of that.
That's awesome, man. Again, like I said, you're amazing inside the ring, and now doing the commentating, you're still doing your thing and doing excellent at it. So, man, again, I want to say thank you for all the sacrifice you did inside the ring, and keep doing what you're doing, man. Like I said, the podcast is great. I love hearing you and Big John, and I love hearing you commentate, especially for Bellator, man.
Thanks, brother. Hey, just make sure everyone's listening, check out our Weighing In podcast. We're on YouTube, we're on Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, all that other stuff, Spotify. We're everywhere. So check us out there on all the audio platforms as well. And then Bellator this Friday night. Don't miss it. The prelims I think are on Bellator YouTube. Yep. Check those out. The prelims are actually stacked. You're going to see a lot of great fights in the prelims. And then you have on Showtime, you've got the main card. So check us out this Friday night, Bellator on Showtime. Good stuff. Anthony Rumble Johnson makes his debut. Cannot wait.
Definitely, man. Again, thank you so much for coming, Josh. I appreciate you. And God bless, brother, all right?
Take it easy, my man.